I was lurking around on your social media, and you said that there was a time, it said, this is okay. There was a time when you doubted your skill set as a pilot and felt like you didn't belong, like you were an imposter.
Yeah.
And, we've talked on our podcast several times about imposter syndrome. What strategy, unpack that a little bit. What's helped you break free from it? Or if it comes back, how do you administer, manage, navigate that?
The idea of the imposter syndrome, the more I share about that and about dealing with it myself, the more I find so many other people are dealing with this concern, this psychological challenge of feeling like they're an imposter, that feeling of like at any moment somebody's going to come and take me off the stage and say, "Hey kid, we finally figured out you're not good enough, you don't belong," or "Hey kid, you don't belong in the cockpit," right?
Yeah.
And
Side
so
note, you mean the voice in my head saying right now, what am I doing being a podcaster? Oh, but I'll go and listen to that voice.
Right. And so, and that voice gets loud. And if we're not careful to really understand how to manage those voices, that inner voice, right? That small talk that tells us we're not good enough, that we don't know what we're doing. And we're looking left and right, and we're comparing ourselves to others. If we're not careful about it, it can get the best of us. And oftentimes what happens is people actually, they won't even try because they're afraid of being an imposter or considered an imposter. And I had someone tell me years ago, they said, "Jason, you know the difference between the imposter and the person who has imposter syndrome?" So, well, what? They said the imposter knows that he or she is an imposter. Wait a minute, right? How brilliant is that?
Right. How ironic.
Exactly, right? And so when you start looking at this idea, it's for me personally, I've had it in that moment where I'm sitting in that cockpit of that Boeing 777 airplane and I'm got 300 passengers in the back at 707,000 pounds. And I'm like, wait a minute, am I going to forget the right button at the right time for the right reason? Am I going to forget how to take the plane off appropriately? Am I going to forget how to land the plane right? Like all these thoughts go to my mind. And then I've had that moment where I'm in combat and I've got a combat crew with me and they have trusted me with their lives, which inherently says that their families have trusted me, the aircraft commander, the mission commander, with their lives. That high performance team, Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, whatever the team is on the ground, they're trusting me to make sure that we provide the support that they expect from us. And what if I screw this up? Am I going to crash this airplane? Am I going to mess up the mission? And all of these thoughts are playing around in my head. And so as I struggle with that, I realize that, wait a minute, there's more to it. And I talked to another friend. He says, "Jason," he says, "here's the deal." He says, "I stopped struggling with imposter syndrome." And I thought, that's kind of crazy because you're pretty freaking successful. And it's noted and documented in scientific research that majority of very successful people and upwardly successful people, they're dealing with this thing called imposter syndrome. Well, he says, "Jason," he says, "here's the deal." He says, "If I lose in court," he was a litigating attorney. He says, "If I lose in court, I don't chalk that up to me not being good enough." He says, "I prepare enough that when I step in that court, I no longer feel like an imposter. And if I lose, it's because I went up against a worthy opponent."
Mhm.
He says, "So Jason, you have to learn how to trust yourself. You have to learn how to trust your successes, trust your training, trust your processes, and trust and empower yourself that you know what you're doing." Once I started owning that, once I started going, let me look back at my wins. Let me look at what got me here. Oftentimes people, they talk about the seat at the table. It's one thing to get a seat at the table. In majority of environments, you have to earn a seat at the table. But then you have to continue to earn the title of leader. You have to earn your seat at the table continuously.
That's
And if
right.
I know that I'm doing that every single day, then there is absolutely no reason why I should feel like an imposter. And that's how, for me, I've learned how to manage that challenge of the imposter syndrome. I can go back and look at my playbook. Hey, what was the challenge I overcame last time? Hey, what was this thing? How did I win this? How did I succeed here? Oh, okay, go back to the drawing board. Channel that energy, channel what you did there. Now, remember, if you did that there, you can do it here.
Right.
And once you start programming yourself to not get lost in the sauce of everybody else and what they're doing, it's like the horses, right? We put the blinders on the horse when we put them down the track or when they're doing the carriage rides. It's so that they focus. And for us as people, we have to remember to run our race.
Yeah.
I can't run Seth's race.
Yeah.
I got to run my race, right?
That's right.
And
It's
once
so,
we do
so
that,
important. Yeah.
It makes all the difference to overcome that imposter
Yeah.
syndrome.
And newsflash, Lieutenant Colonel Jason Harris, who has the proprietary methodology called no fail trust, deals with the challenge of imposter syndrome, which implicitly boils down to trusting yourself. So there's the newsflash and the irony warning, irony alert.
Absolutely. When I get on that stage, Seth, I'll finish this up and say this. People always ask, I said, well, man, you know, I've seen you in front of a stage with over 10,000 people. I've seen you in all these different stages. Are you ever afraid? I said, well, yes and no. Here's the thing. I always am there in service of the people, in service of the audience. And my fear, my anxiety is because I don't want to disappoint them and I don't want to fail to deliver to them. But beyond that, I'm comfortable because I know that I've come prepared to give everything that I've got in that amount of time that I'm given on that stage to honor that stage. And that takes the edge off. But yes, there's a fear, there's the imposter syndrome
Yeah.
that maybe I'm not good enough at times. But I realize, no, you're okay, Jason. They hired you for a reason. You know what you're doing, and you came ready, you came prepared, and you've got the training that supports what you're about to do right now. So trust yourself, go out there and deliver for that client.
It's so poignant. This thought flashed across my mind. I saw recently this documentary, The Rolling Stones, and it was very old footage. And they were probably late 70s in part of one of their peaks. And they asked Mick Jagger, what's the last thing you think about before you go on stage? And he says, he didn't hesitate. He goes, boy, am I glad we rehearsed as much as we did.
Yes.
And that's Mick, you know what, Jagger. I mean, effing, come on, you know?
Right?
And there it is. So there's the preparation.